Hello there, welcome to the Saraway channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing very well. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 4 of our story tonight, and what an exciting story it is. What a dreadful mother-in-law Sonia Finnegan is. I feel very, very sorry for poor old Sandra. But let's continue with the story, shall we, and go and get yourself something lovely to drink. So let's continue with part 4 of our story tonight. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. So let's continue with our story. Lydia was silent for a brief moment, almost as if the cat had got her tongue. And then she spoke, her attention directed fiercely on Gully. "I know you're not happy to see me, Gully."
"Happy? Of course I'm not happy. Why the hell would you accept my mother's invitation to the coast? You know what my mother's like. I assume you know I'm a married man. Or has that fact conveniently slipped your mind?"
"Oh, don't be mad at me, Gully. Of course I know you're married. I'm well informed, you know. Your mother told me that on the phone. I'm not here to dredge up the past, if that's what you think."
"You could have fooled me,"
said Gully, snorting. His head was still shaking furiously as he glared defiantly at his ex-wife. "Look, Gully, I just wanted to say for the record, I'm very sorry for what I did back then, when I cheated on you. I did it to get revenge on you, because you refused to refurbish the kitchen. I know it was pathetic, really pathetic. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. It was an immature, insane thing for me to do. But to be fair, I was drunk at the time, and I got carried away with your best friend. But had I been sober, I'd have never gone off with him in the way I did. Just so you know, Gully, you're the only man I've ever loved. I'd never willingly cheat on you."
"I don't care, Liddy, if you were drunk or not, when you went off with my best friend. There is no excuse for what you did. You crossed the line and you know it."
"I know I did, Gully. I was an absolute idiot. Just so you know, I've grown up a lot since then. I never knew my foolish, deranged actions would lead to our breakup. I made a catastrophic mistake. One I deeply regret. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Gully, and I threw our relationship away. But we can move on past this and at least be civilized to each other. It's water under the bridge now, surely. I'd like it very much if we could be friends. It would make things so much easier between the two of us."
"I think you should get your things, Lydia, and leave at once. Honestly, I don't know why you're entertaining the idea that we should still be friends together. I think that ship has long since sailed, don't you? I wish you well, Lydia, I really do. And if you have regrets for what happened back then, well, I appreciate the fact that you apologized. But we all make mistakes. But I've moved on with my life, and you would do well to do the same. As I said, I accept your apology, but you've already told me that you're sorry, and I've accepted it. So why are we harping over this again? I thought we agreed at the time to go our separate ways, and as I said, put the past behind us. So I can't for the life of me understand what you're doing here. Did my mother put you up to this? I rather suspect she did. Did she give you the false impression that the old flame between us could easily be rekindled? Because I assure you it cannot. I cannot say it plainer than that."
"I've put the past behind me, Gully. Of course I have," said Lydia insistently. "I'm here for very different reasons, I'll have you know."
"Honestly, Gully,"
said Sonia Finnegan, interjecting herself into the conversation,
"you can see Lydia over here is very upset with what happened between the two of you. She apologized, did she not? I think it's very unkind of you to disregard her as a good friend. Just because she messed up, Gully. You're the one that needs to be grown up about this, instead of acting like a wounded animal, trying to fend off a predator. I've been great friends with Lydia for many years, and I invited her here for good reason. The least you can do is to be civil towards her, and make her feel welcome in our home, instead of looking at her so contemptuously, with dagger-like eyes."
I had been sitting there staring at Lydia in disbelief, my hand still reasonably warm from shaking her hand. I was stunned to see how magnificently beautiful she was. Gulliver had never told me she was such a head-turner. Everything about her was as close to perfect as you could get, from her long dark brown heavily highlighted hair, along with her beguiling greenish-brown eyes, fringed by thick black luscious lashes, which I was sure were not fake. Lydia was both elegant and sophisticated, in the same way that Sonia Finnegan was. They were like two birds of a feather. Lydia's presence in the dining room was making me feel completely frumpy, in the scruffy pair of Bermuda shorts I was wearing. I was beginning to feel self-conscious about the extra doughy weight around my middle, which suddenly made me feel so enormous as I compared myself to this extremely slender woman. I could see exactly why Sonia Finnegan liked Lydia so much. I could see them hanging around in the same social circles together, mixing with people from affluent backgrounds, drinking lattes in coffee shops, and thoroughly enjoying shopping together in designer boutiques. I remember hearing Sonia Finnegan telling her husband that I was like a cart horse compared to Lydia, who was a thoroughbred. And in that moment I certainly felt like a cart horse, big, clumsy and ungainly, whereas Lydia was like a ballerina, light, ethereal, and so incredibly graceful. My eyes skimmed over Lydia, like someone desperate to find some fault in the perfection that was standing before me, so that I could feel marginally better about myself. But honestly, everything about Lydia was annoyingly perfect, from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. It was as if Lydia had come out of one of those moulds, with nothing remotely out of place. It did give me pause for thought, to wonder what Gully saw in me, with all my imperfections blazingly on display. Lydia was wearing an elegant pair of navy blue crop pants, with a white t-shirt, and an elegant necklace around her neck, which included some real pearls. Her outfit was simplistic and stylish, making me feel that my frumpy Bermuda shorts needed to be discarded at once, at the earliest opportunity, and never get to see the light of day ever again. In fact, my entire wardrobe needed a very critical overhaul.
"I'm not being unreasonable, Mum. I resent your saying that," said Gully. "You're to blame for all of this, Mum, I hope you realise. You seem to really enjoy setting the cat among the pigeons, don't you? And causing an immeasurable amount of drama wherever you go. If your life is so dreary and dull at the coast, why don't you audition for a part in some seedy soap opera on television? Because at least the drama can be contained on the show, and not burgeon out into our everyday lives like a rampant overgrown vine." "I'm not trying to invite drama, Gully. You know I love living here by the coast. I have a very full and contented life, thank you very much, and plenty of friends. I don't need to be dramatic, and I resent the implication that you say that I am being dramatic." "You could have fooled me, Mum. If that's the case, will you kindly tell me why you invited Lydia to stay here, when you knew full well I was bringing Sandra with me? To stay at the coast. What you've done is not right, Mum, and you know it. If you think that Lydia and I are going to get back together, as I keep reiterating to you over and over again, I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen. I know how your mind works, Mum, and how deviously underhanded you can sometimes be, in your determination to get your way. I love Sandra. There's nothing you can do or say to change my mind about her. You have the audacity to call Lydia family, after what she did to me. Whose side are you actually on, Mum? That's what I'd like to know." "I'm not taking anybody's side, Gulliver, but I'm afraid Lydia is family, so the sooner we can get our heads around that, the better. You need to get on better with Lydia, because you're going to see a lot more of her, whether you like it or not. So the very least you can do is try and get along. Lydia's told you, Gulliver, that she's sorry for some of the mistakes she's made in the past, and it would be very gracious of you to forgive her." "What on earth has got into you, Mum? Didn't you hear what I told her? I've already forgiven her. Are you tone deaf or something?" Gully turned around to address his father, exasperation written all over his face. In his silent body language, his message was unambiguously clear. He was clandestinely begging his father to intercede on his behalf, to make his doggedly stubborn, unreasonable mother see sense. "Tell her, Dad. Tell Mum she's out of line, bringing Lydia here to stay with us. Did you even know about this, Dad? Did you know Mum had invited Lydia here?" Connor Finnegan shook his head. "I knew nothing about this, Gully. Nothing about this at all. If I had known what your sneaky mother was up to, you know me, I'd have discouraged her from inviting Lydia around here. I'm sorry, Lydia," said Mr. Finnegan, turning to direct his attention on his ex-daughter-in-law. "I know Sonia is very fond of you, and you're a good friend of hers. But I don't think it's appropriate you're staying with us while Gully and Sandra are around. It makes things rather awkward. You are, of course, welcome to come and stay here with me and my wife, when my son and his wife Sandra are not staying with us at the same time. I can't say it fairer than that. I'm with my son on this one, I'm afraid."
"I came here precisely, Mr. Finnegan, because Gully is here with his new wife Sandra. It's important we all get on. That's the whole idea of this rendezvous, don't you see?"
"Tell them, Lydia. Now is a good time as any," said Sonia encouragingly. "As I was saying to you, Gully, before you rudely interrupted me with all your protests, is that Lydia is here for very good reason. And it's not to cause chaos or mayhem with your relationship with Sandra. So for goodness sake, keep your hair on, son. The only drama that's unfolding around the dinner table is the drama you're creating, Gully. Why don't you sit down, and I will bring everyone a piece of apple pie, just out of the oven, shall I? And then you can listen to what Lydia has to say. And then you will completely understand why she came to stay here for a few days."
I watched Lydia making herself comfortable at the table. Gully had reached my hand under the table to grab it. He gave it an encouraging squeeze. He then whispered in my ear,
"I'm so sorry, Sandra. I don't know what the hell has got into my mother."
Sonia Finnegan had placed delicious slices of piping hot apple pie that had just come out of the oven in front of us. She also passed around the clotted cream. But everyone had lost their appetite. Nobody appeared to be remotely interested in dessert. It smelt so good, of course, and I had been dreaming of that apple pie. But now that I felt like a blob or a big beached whale when I compared myself to Lydia, the idea of eating any of that apple pie made me imagine myself growing 5 times larger. All eyes around the dinner table were fixed on Lydia, and apart from Sonia Finnegan, I think we were all thinking, what the hell is this woman doing here? Little did I know, of course, that the answer would soon be forthcoming, and in a moment it would feel like someone had thrown a piece of very sharp shrapnel at my life. Lydia straightened her back up in the chair, as if she was bracing herself for what she was about to tell us. Her right hand was playing rather awkwardly with the fork on her plate, next to the apple pie, that I was sure she was never going to eat. Lydia was a woman who, I was absolutely certain, religiously drank green smoothies for breakfast every morning, and religiously ate poached salmon and seared asparagus for dinner every night. I was certain no sugar had dared to touch her lips for years on end. Sonia pulled out a chair around the table and sat down next to Lydia. I noticed her lips were twitching rather too much, almost as if she was trying to hold back a gloating smile that was about to erupt on her face. I rather suspected she was thoroughly enjoying causing me a sense of great disquiet. I was in no doubt she wanted me to feel that Lydia was a great threat to my marriage. And in that delusional self-punishing moment, when my self-esteem was the size of an ant, I really began to feel the impending, dreaded possibility that Lydia was here to tear my marriage to Gully apart. I was sure that was the reason she'd come.
"Go on, Lydia, tell everybody the truth, will you?" said Sonia Finnegan, her eyes lingering over me for rather too long. "Gully's going to have to know about this sooner or later, so it might as well be now. Out with it, girl. You can do it." "Know about what?" asked Gully. "If you've got something to say, Lydia, why don't you just come out with it? I'm listening."
Lydia looked awkward for a brief moment, and then she said, "We have a little girl, Gully. She's 1 year old, to be exact. Her name is Meredith, and I think she deserves to get to know her father, don't you? You will love her, Gully. She is so cute as a button. She's the splitting image of you, I have to say." Gully's eyes widened. His jaw dropped wide open, while I stared at Lydia in confoundment, wondering if I'd actually heard right. Was she really telling Gully that he was the father of her 1-year-old girl? This had to be some kind of sick joke, surely, for neither me or Gully had got any inkling that Lydia, his ex-wife, had ever been pregnant
when they got divorced. But then, after Lydia had cheated on him, he'd never seen her again because she'd moved away to another state. Was this Lydia's insidious way to try and get Gully back into her own life, in some deviously underhanded plan of hers? If this was a game, it wasn't going to end well. If she was here to announce that she and Gully had a child, then it had to be true, surely. No one would willingly make something like that up, would they? "You have a baby girl, and you claim she's mine," said Gully, looking astounded. "Why do I find that hard to believe, Lydia? You made no mention that you were pregnant when we got divorced, and now you're here claiming I'm a father to a 1-year-old girl that I know absolutely nothing about. Excuse me if I'm a bit dubious." "Well, to be fair, Gulliver," said Sonia Finnegan, interjecting into the conversation and taking over like she normally did, "Lydia didn't know at the time she was pregnant. She didn't know for many months. And you didn't see her for a long time. None of us did. Besides all that, she's always been extremely trim, so she had no way of knowing she was pregnant until much later on in her pregnancy. She contacted me recently to ask for some of your DNA, and then I sent her off an old toothbrush of yours. The DNA turned out to be a perfect match to yours, Gully. You're a father. Isn't that wonderful news, Gully? Me and your father are grandparents now. I couldn't be prouder. I, for one, am looking very forward to getting to know my little granddaughter." "Is this some kind of a joke? You didn't think to tell me any of this, Lydia?" said Gully, sounding furious. "Why did you not contact me sooner? I would have quite liked to know if I was a father, don't you think?" "Well, at the time I was heartbroken. You had ditched me, Gully. I moved away from you to a different state, didn't I? And when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to involve you. I knew I could raise Meredith as a single mother. But over the last year, I've been thinking about it an awful lot. And I thought it would be such a shame if Meredith didn't get to know her real dad. I mean, every little girl deserves to know her father, don't you think? You're a good man, Gully. You really are. And I don't want to deprive my daughter of a relationship with you. It was your mother's idea to invite me over here for a few days, because we all need to learn to get on, don't we? I'm sure you would want to be very much involved in Meredith's life, and that means you're always going to have contact with me in some way, whether you like it or not, Gully." "So where is this daughter of mine, then?" "She's not here, Gully. I wouldn't bring her here while we're discussing all this. I've left her in my parents' charge. I accepted your mother's kind invitation for a few days at the coast to discuss this matter with you, your wife, and with your mum and dad, to work out a way in which you can have access to Meredith. She's a lovely little girl, and she is so like you, Gully, in every regard. You're going to adore her." At this point, I couldn't take this conversation any longer. I felt like a balloon that had just been popped, as if all the oxygen had been vanquished from my system. I knew exactly why Sonia Finnegan had invited Lydia over to the house, and was so keen to announce that Gulliver was now a father. It was her duplicitous, artful way of trying to bring Lydia and Gully back together again. In that quintessential moment, I began to seriously doubt my relationship with Gully, as to whether it had the strength to overcome a hurdle like this. I could feel the nausea rising up in the back of my throat, and I felt absolutely certain I was going to be violently sick. So I quickly excused myself from the dinner table. Not that anyone appeared to notice, for all eyes were steadily fixed on Lydia, who had stolen everybody's undivided focus, and Gully, who was so astonished by Lydia's news, appeared to be locked under some kind of bewildered trance. I hastily made a dash to my bedroom upstairs, where in the bathroom en suite I began to hurl up the contents of my stomach rather violently. I was sweating profusely, as beads of unbridled moisture droplets dappled my forehead, almost as if I had been hit with a heavy fever. The bitter taste of gall clung to the back of my throat, with my heart pounding rather violently in my chest, and every single cell in my body standing up to attention. I opened the sliding doors from the bedroom that led out onto the balcony. I was desperate to get into the cool air of the night, as if it was a warm friend that would eagerly embrace me, who could offer me the assurances that no one in the dining room could. I took big gulps of the cool, briny air, staring out at the night sky with a sense of awe and wonderment,
allowing the silvery stars in the firmament to blast away some of my troubles. I didn't want to think about Lydia's horrifying revelations around the dinner table that evening. I noticed on the far side of the balcony there was a fire escape that I'd never observed before, with a narrow pencil-thin spiral of stairs that led down to the downstairs patio. In that quintessential moment, I was overcome with an urgent need to take a walk on the beach. The brisk exercise would do me the world of good, I thought. I glanced down briefly at my watch and was astonished to see it was 11 o'clock. We had started the evening meal rather late, but I couldn't believe it was an hour away from midnight. I didn't care that it was so dark. I didn't care that I was not acquainted with the beach or the tidal times. I didn't care that I didn't like the dark. I needed an escape, and a quick one at that. All I knew right now is I couldn't stay in the house for a moment or second longer. I felt suffocated. Lydia's presence in the Finnegan household had sucked out the oxygen from my lungs, squeezing them completely dry. For what she had revealed around the dinner table about my husband being the father of her 1-year-old daughter was too much for me to get my head around. The waves of nausea were relentless, I'm afraid, and were cruelly clinging to the back of my throat, refusing to abate. So I was gagging for some fresh air. In truth, I could not escape the beachfront house fast enough. I wanted to get away from Gully, from my in-laws, and from Lydia herself. All of a sudden I felt like the one that didn't belong in the Finnegan household, as if Lydia herself was pushing me away from my husband Gully, with this announcement that was to change the whole course of our lives, I was most sure. And what if Gully was to decide that he should rekindle the flame with Lydia again, as after all, he was a father to her child, and he'd want to be very much involved in his daughter's life. This was all such a dreadful mess, and I felt all the more hurt by the triumphant look I'd seen on Sonia Finnegan's face when she had announced that Lydia was family and would always be a part of our lives. That woman would have done anything to get Lydia and Gully back together again. She'd probably be absolutely delighted if Gully and I were to get divorced. She would likely persuade him to do the right thing by Lydia, by throwing me to the curbside, and remarry his ex-wife. I'm embarrassed to say I was tormented by so many doubts, which undermined the great relationship I had with Gully. It was true that Gully professed to me that I was the love of his life, but now our love would surely be tested with the bomb that had just been released in our lives, like an unwanted curveball. Tears were stinging my eyes, my nose was running, and I was a sorry sight indeed. My fear of the dark was overridden by the desperate need to get away. Almost as if running from the Finnegan household fast and hard would be running away from everything that had just happened around the dinner table that evening. While I was on the beach, at the very least I could pretend to myself that none of this had happened. I grabbed a torch and immediately darted down the iron staircase of the fire escape. I ran down a footpath to the beach. I glanced briefly back at the Finnegan house, and I could see the silhouettes of Mr. and Mrs. Finnegan and Lydia seated around the dinner table. I could see Gully was standing upright, pacing up and down the dining room, with his hands running through his hair, which meant he was quite stressed about what had just transpired. I guess it's not every day you learn out of the blue that you've become a father. I didn't want to think how Lydia's little 1-year-old girl would ultimately impact our lives. Gully and I wanted to have children of our own one day, and he now already had a child with another woman, and knowing this was gut-wrenching and soul-destroying for me, to say the very least. The more I thought about this, the more violently ill I suddenly became. I couldn't believe that this was actually happening to me. I threw off my sandals when I reached the end of the footpath, so that my bare feet were greeted to the cool feel of the beach sand on my toes, and the sensation was both soothing and comforting. I had done field and track as a schoolgirl, and been very good at it too, but over the years my athletic prowess had significantly dwindled, especially with the doughy weight gain around my middle. It was so dark on the beach, but my torch lit up the path ahead of me. I could hear the ocean waves crashing against the shore, and feel a soft breeze nuzzling my cheeks, almost as if the breeze was reassuring me that all was well. I wish I could believe that. As I ran, the exercise helped me let go of my thoughts like releasing a balloon on the wind. I ran and ran down the beach, and it went on forever. It would seem as if there was no end in sight, but I didn't care. I could run forever and never stop, for the adrenaline pulsing through my veins was not brought on by fear, but by the recent happenings over the course of the evening, My energy seemed to be turbocharged. I failed to realize how breathless I'd become, for my physical comfort was the least of my concerns right now. I could see there were many crabs on the beach, scurrying all over the wet sand. Some of them were impressively large, and all over the beach were washed up pieces of seaweed from the recent tide. All of a sudden I felt a very big spasm go through me, and then it got too much, as I became lightheaded and extremely dizzy. I'm not exactly sure what happened to me, but I suddenly fainted and collapsed on the beach. I remember 1 minute I was running, and the next I wasn't. I was lying on the beach. The cooling water from the ocean waves was pooling around my body. I could feel its icy fingers seeping through my clothes. Even though I was in a state of semi-consciousness, I was fully aware of the physical sensations that were occurring around me in an abstract, dreamlike way. The next thing I knew, I was being dragged across the beach sand, away from the water to a drier spot, I suspect. Someone was leaning over me and slapping me urgently on the face. I kept hearing the words, "Kiwi! Kiwi! Kiwi!" or something like that. I know when most people have a fainting spell, shortly afterwards they wake up, but I'm not sure what had happened to me, and why I was aware of what was going on in a disconnected way. Looking back, I still don't know much about my unorthodox blackout or why it occurred, but I think it was longer than just for a few minutes. Even though I was well aware of someone attending to me on the beach, whoever they were, they made me feel safe and protected, as if I was being nursed in my mother's own bosom. Whoever they were crouching over me, they kept slapping my face and saying, "Kyoki! Kyoki!" something like that. I tried to open my eyes, but it was so delicious keeping them closed. I felt so safe and content. I was sure I was in my bed, dreaming all this, that I was on a beach and someone was trying to rouse me from my sleep. But I just wanted to continue sleeping and remain in this blissfully disconnected and semi-conscious state. I was annoyed with this person, whoever they were, trying to get my attention. So a stubbornness overcame me as I continued to sleep. "Kauki! Kauki!" said the voice insistently, slapping me on the cheeks again. Slowly but surely I reluctantly opened my eyes, and then I saw a large figure squatting over me. I realized that someone was staring down at me through honey-coloured eyes that were expressing grave concern. I was staring into the human-like face of a female Bigfoot, who was towering over me, as if I was all but a tiny, very fragile china doll. I'd felt so terribly big around Lydia, so it was good to suddenly feel so small. My eyes began to bulge from their sockets, my jaw dropping to the ground, as I wondered if I was really dreaming. It had to be a dream, surely. This Bigfoot could not be real. Or could she? My torch was lying on the ground, a few feet away from me. It must have dropped out of my hands when the Bigfoot had dragged me away from the wet sand. But it was positioned in such an angle that the light seemed to spill generously over the Bigfoot's face, so I could see her clearly. She looked so relieved that I'd opened my eyes. "Are you real?" I asked her, thinking no, this was definitely a dream. And then in my head I telepathically heard an answer. "Of course I'm real. What happened? Are you all right? I found you collapsed on the beach. I was very concerned about you, for your state was not a good one." I stared up at the Bigfoot in amazement and managed the words, "Did you just talk to me? Or was that my imagination?" "Of course I talked to you," I heard in my head again. "Would you like me to help you to your feet? You look like you've lost all your strength. You're very upset about something. A blue haze is swirling around you furiously. It's a vicious haze. Haven't seen a blue haze like that since my mother miscarried a few years ago. She was in a bad place back then." "A blue haze?" I asked. I did not ask this out loud. I asked this in my head. "Sorry, what is a blue haze?" The answer arrived in my head almost immediately. "A blue haze is an energy signature. It's of despair, grief, disappointment and confusion. You are wearing that on your person right now. Yours is a vicious one. It sucked the very life out of your soul. No wonder you collapsed," said the Bigfoot. She continued, "The blue haze can be very overwhelming, especially when you've had a nasty shock of some kind. I've known many of my kind to pass out when they're wearing a blue haze. It's a powerful energy, an indomitable energy that can drain your reserves fast. But luckily it's very uncommon. It's only brought on by extreme stress." "You know all about me by looking at me," I asked, confounded. What you say is absolutely true. I've had a big shock this evening. I believe it might destroy my life. That's why I came out onto the beach to get some fresh air. I ran and ran, hoping I could run away from my troubles, but fat lot of good that did me. How can you tell I'm going through this? The Bigfoot answered me again. I read energy signatures, like I read the weather patterns in the sky, so I know whether it's going to be a good day or a bad one, whether it's going to rain or whether the sun is going to shine. Even when I kill an animal to eat, I always check the energy signature. It has to be absolutely right. I need to know that the animal has lived a good life and is healthy. I do it with plants as well. I would never ever hunt an animal with a blue energy signature, because that would mean the animal was heavily diseased, highly stressed, in a bad place. And eating food like that can damage your own energy signature. Everything is energy around you, so you have to be careful what you consume. There are sick plants that give off a blue energy light, and you don't eat those. They'll make you very, very sick. Everything around us is energy, but a blue haze means the animal or plant is under considerable stress. You see that large crab over there? I bet you think it's healthy. I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. That crab is very sick. He'll be dead in 24 hours. He's got a blue signature. Will this blue energy signature you say that is surrounding me, will it go away? I asked. Of course it will go away. Yours is temporary, you see. A lot of blue energy signatures aren't. If it's on an animal indefinitely, and on a plant, well, they're guaranteed to die within 24 hours. But yours is just passing through. It won't last for very long. So you don't need to worry about it. In the morning, your energy signature will be a rosy one. You're saying my troubles will go away? I asked. Absolutely. In the morning, you will be fine. Your energy signature will be pink. Now let me help you to your feet and see if you're strong enough to go back home. Your house is that white building on the beach, I assume. I don't see any other house around for miles, so I imagine that must be where you're staying. That's right, I said to the Bigfoot, who lifted me up with one of her powerful overlong arms and watched me take a few steps. She walked by my side down the beach, and once we reached the Finnegan property, she tapped me on the back very gently. You'll be fine, she told me telepathically. Don't let the blue haze drag you down. It's going away. It's passing through. She then nodded and glided away, and in that moment I realized I hadn't thanked her for her extreme kindness. I made my way back up the fire escape into my bedroom, and when I saw Gully was not around, in a desperate need of his reassurance, I quickly tiptoed down the landing and down the large staircase, making my way to the living room. It was the only room with the light left on. I was thinking that I would find Gully there, but before I got to the living room, I heard Sonia Finnegan say, Well, Gully's gone to the beach looking for that annoying wife of his. Honestly, what he sees in that dull, nondescript, dreary woman, I honestly don't know. She's wandered off, I guess, rather aimlessly. She must have been upset to hear our announcement over the dinner table. Thankfully, my husband's gone to bed, so we can have a nice little chinwag before Gully and his wife get back. Do you really think we can pull this off, Sonia? Why do I feel so doubtful? Said Lydia. I mean, what if Gully finds out the baby isn't his? What if he doesn't believe the fake DNA results that I present him with, and he does his own DNA test? Then he'll find out I've been lying to him all along. He need never find out, love. This is strictly between the two of us. He thinks I've seen the DNA report, so he believes the baby is his. I want the two of you back together again where you belong. I'm sure now he believes he has a baby girl with you. That wife of his will be given her calling cards pretty soon, which is no great tragedy as far as I'm concerned. If you and Gully can be together again, and you are back in our family, where you've always belonged, everything will be fantastic. You saw for yourself that Sandra doesn't fit into our home at all. She's not like us. That girl is a small-town girl with no sophistication whatsoever. But are you sure, Sonia, that this is actually going to work? Can we really pull the wool over Gully's eyes? He's always been as sharp as a tack. You could see how furious he was with me to see me again. I've got a horrible feeling in my gut that he may be in love with his wife. And if that is the case, then he's never going to want to remarry me, even if I present Meredith as his own.
How will he ever commit to me then? Oh, don't worry about that at all. He thinks he's in love with Sandra. But I can put a stop to that sooner or later. Make him see sense. I'll sort Gully out. Leave him to me. I'll make him see his responsibilities as a father to you. He needs to divorce that wife of his as soon as possible and remarry you. And I will make sure it happens. Not if I have a say in the matter, I said, boldly entering the living room and taking both women off guard. I heard everything you said, Sonia. I think the fact that you're trying to pretend Lydia's baby girl is Gully's is disgusting. I wonder what Gully will have to say about all this. All of a sudden, Gully was at my side. He was flustered from having run across the beach looking for me everywhere, but had returned to the house to see if I had got back home. He had heard me confront his mother and Lydia and wondered what was going on. "What's going on here?" asked Gully. "What's all this about?" Sonia's face turned white, and Lydia was beginning to tremble. "I don't know how to tell you this, Gully," I said, "but your mother and Lydia have been conspiring against you. They're trying to make you believe that Lydia's baby is yours, and I'm afraid to tell you she's not." "You mean all this stuff and nonsense about me being a father was not true in the first place?" he asked Lydia in bewilderment. "Why would you make something like that up? Surely you know me better than that. I'd have done my own DNA test to assure my child's parentage, because I don't trust you, Lydia, as far as I can throw you." "Well, it's your mother's fault," said Lydia, pointing to Sonia. "It was her idea to tell you that you were the father of my baby. She was hoping you and I, could make a go of things, get back together again. And she thought the baby would do it for us." "Why am I not surprised by this?" said Gully, looking at Lydia and then at his mother with disgust. "So tell me, Lydia, who is the father of your child? Let me guess, it's my best friend, is it?"
"It is," admitted Lydia. "He doesn't even know he has a child with me. I haven't told him. I was raising Meredith as a single mother, you see. Then your mother contacted me. And well—" Lydia did not finish her sentence, as Gully interrupted her. I could see his face was jiggling in indignation. His eyes had grown hard and cold, and I realized in that quintessential moment that Gully couldn't stand the very sight of Lydia.
"You decided to pretend the baby you had was mine, and my mother put you up to this. How could you do that, Lydia? It's treacherous of you. But if you think for a moment I would leave the love of my life to marry you, think again. It would never have happened. I would be as miserable as hell married to you. I'd have done the right thing by our baby, of course. But to think you would deceive me like this, you should be ashamed of yourself. And you too, Mum."
"I'm very sorry, Gulliver," said Sonia. I just thought that—"
"Sandra wasn't good enough for me, is that what you thought, Mum? For your information, I don't care what you think about Sandra. She's the love of my life, and I need you to respect that. Sandra, go and pack our things, will you? We're leaving."
"But leaving? You can't do that, Gulliver. You've only just got here.
Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about, Mum. You conspired to lie to me about Lydia's baby, passing it off as my own. How could you do that to me? I'd be raising somebody else's child."
"I did it because sometimes you can't see what is best for you, Gulliver. Sometimes you need a push in the right direction, that's all."
"Mum, I don't need you making my decisions for me concerning my life. I'm perfectly capable of making them myself."
I felt extreme relief wash over me as I rushed up the stairs, threw a few things in the suitcase, and me and my husband left our indoors to make the journey back home. And I'm glad to say he allowed me to have the air conditioning on all the way. In the months that followed, Sonia did a lot of grovelling and apologising to us. So we did go down to the coast for 3 weeks, and every evening I would take long walks along the beach, hoping to see the Bigfoot again, but sadly I never did. But I'm absolutely certain she's still out there. I'm glad to say these days Sonia Finnegan treats me with a lot more respect, only for Gully's sake, of course, because Gully has warned her that if she so much as upsets one hair on my head, she'll never see us for dust again. And with a baby on the way, with my being 8 months pregnant, with only a month to go, Sonia wants to thoroughly enjoy the perks of being a grandmother, so the last thing she wants to do is to cause me any upset. So good did finally come out of the bad, and I think that all the chaotic upheaval
in the Finnegan household, when Lydia arrived on the scene, was worth it, because I got to meet an extraordinary creature on the beach, as a consequence, who helped me up to my feet again after I fainted. And when I look back on that extraordinary event, I sometimes ask myself, did that really happen? But I assure you it did. So there you are. That's my story.
Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night. Okay. Okay, guys. Can you just stop? Can you just stop the excitement?